Budgeting may seem like an overly complex task, one that you just want to put off and do anything else, but rather than look at your personal budget. In this video, we're going to be going over really the three basic steps that you need to develop a budget, and hopefully you find that it's very easy to do. And luckily, due to some technological advancements, it's even easier nowadays to keep track of your budget on a minute by minute basis. All right, so let's take a look at what we have. I've broken this down into a few steps. So when we look at the budgeting process, it's really these three steps. One is going to be developing the budget. Those are sort of your benchmarking. You're going to have a point that you're going to start, and you're going to make adjustments as, of course, as you go. You're going to obviously need to track your purchases. This is where many budgets have failed in the past because it used to be very laborious, where you're keeping receipts and you're marking things down in notebooks, and it was very hard, and that's where most people gave up on the personal budgeting, having a personal budgeting plan. But again, luckily, technology has come into the rescue and it is super easy nowadays. And then lastly, of course, you need to analyze it. And that was kind of the fun part. And again, technology has made that very easy as well as far as analyzing. All right, well, let's take a look at step one and with developing. And to develop a budget, you're going to need to come up with these estimates. Obviously, there's two things going on here. There's income, that's what you put in your pocket, and there's outgo and expenses. For a budget to work, obviously, you can't spend more than you make, at least on a consistent basis. You might have that one bad month, maybe a couple of bad months, but obviously, from a long-term perspective, you can't spend more than you make. So that's where the discipline comes into play here. But let's take a look at some of these income areas on here and kind of a brief look. And yours might not be these exact categories. You're going to have to come up with categories and expenses that fit your life and what you have going on. These are sort of the generic ones that most of us have or at least will have at some point in our life. And with the income, obviously salary, it is best just to look at that as after tax dollars, because that's what's coming in your pocket, what's going in your bank account. That's what you have to deal with. So don't look at the before tax dollars when you're budgeting with when you're looking at your salary. Bonuses and commission. Some of you might be lucky enough to have jobs where you get a bonus every now and then, or maybe you work strictly on commissions. This is something, if you can, coming up with an estimate in this area may be a little bit more difficult, but again, everybody's situation is a little different. Another area of income typically that folks will have at some point in their life is dividends and interest. Dividends are basically coming off of investments like stocks. Stocks pay the owners of stock, which could be you or me. We get a little dividend check, every now and then from the company if they choose to declare dividends. So you get money from the companies that you own through stocks. So that's called dividends and interest that you earn in the bank. Right now, interest rates are pretty low, so you pretty much don't need to worry about that area. And then gifts, another area where folks typically have some money coming into their account. Maybe you're annually gifted some money from a very rich relative if you're lucky enough. But again, another category of income. All right, now moving on to the expense area. The biggest one for most people is housing. That might be both your rent or a mortgage. So that's a nice one in here. Another one to think about when you're looking at housing, and for those of you that don't own a house, someday you probably will, and highly recommended that you do that at some point when the time is right. But don't forget about property tax. That is also a big part of home ownership. Next area, utilities. It's always surprising on how many things it takes to to live when you're looking at either when you're renting or even especially with home ownership. So you've got your gas, your electric, your water, your garbage, internet, phones, maybe if anybody still has a landline anymore, but that's also another expense you may want to consider in there, a cell phone, um, cable, etc. So all of your major utilities. The other category, the probably second to housing, is transportation. That's that car. Maybe you have a lease payment. Maybe you've got that loan payment. That's what you're going to want to consider when you look at that. Food. This is another one where we all need to eat, and we're going to talk. I'll talk a little bit more about estimates here in just a moment, but you will want to have a category for food. You may even want to break that down. I found this very personally very beneficial in breaking it down into eating out versus eating in or groceries. So groceries versus dining. They would both be considered food, but when I did my personal budget, I found that our family, the dining area was the area to which we were spending by far the most money. You probably want to have an entertainment category because that's necessary. You got to have entertainment. And again, you may want to break that down if you have some specialties. Maybe you have your hobby of some sort in the entertainment area that is significant. You may want to have that. Also, another thing to think about, sort of entertainment, or it might be in a category which we don't have on here called health. You may want to have a health category if some of you are, maybe gym memberships, that kind of thing. Miscellaneous, you probably want to have miscellaneous for other, just whatever you want to have that could pop up that we can't really prescribe a category to. Insurance is a big one, so definitely something to think about. And we will talk about insurance throughout the course, but insurance will be something that you will have both on the health and life insurance. You will also have property and casualty insurance for your home. So there will be some major insurance, expenses coming up pretty much throughout anybody's budget. And looking on here, loans, you may have some other loans in here that would not include your car because you would want to include your car and maybe your mortgage, obviously, in those areas. So make sure you do not duplicate, but any other loans. For many of us, that might be student loans would be in this category. And you might want to think about savings. What are your personal savings goals? How much of your income do you want to save on a regular basis? And you do want to strengthen those savings muscles. That's what this is all about. So start small. Don't be overly ambitious because then you'll be deflated when you don't make it. But maybe it's only 2, 3, 4, 5% to begin with for savings. But you do want to have something in there to strengthen those savings muscles. And then you can build up over time. Retirement. How much are you putting into retirement? Now, be careful on that because you may be doing a 401k, 403b retirement. Those are retirement plans done through work that are going to be coming out of your paycheck before taxes. So you're going to be doing that investment. It's going to be happening for you automatically, but it will already be taken care of for you when you're doing your salary over here in the income area. That's going to be your net, your take home salary, which would have already included the retirement. But again, something to think about, that retirement. That emergency fund, how are you building that? Making sure that you're having those months of expenses, maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's 6 months of expenses set aside. How are you doing that? And if you're lucky enough, or so inclined, what kind of charity do you want to give? Um, Overall, United Way, church, whatever, you may have a charity category. So that's something to think about. Now I mentioned a little bit about estimates. So what you're going to want to do when you're first developing that budget is to come up with some estimates in these categories, whatever categories you decide. And that's going to be the hard part, where really I would recommend doing, you know, perhaps about 8 weeks of tracking, just pure tracking your expenses. Don't worry about having an actual budget, just tracking the expenses that you have so you can see kind of where they're going. And from there, you should hopefully have a kind of a good rhythm of what those expenses would be. The income part's pretty easy for most of us. That's pretty set in stone. It's the expense part and really getting a handle on what that is. From there, you can come up with a dollar amount. So for example, I'll pick on the groceries. That's the one that has some variability for some of us. So let's say groceries. That, you might think, okay, well, over the past 2 months, I've spent $200 a month. Month one, I spent 175 in groceries. In month two, I spent $210 in groceries. You can average it out, or you could, probably the best way to do it would be to average it and say, okay, I'm going to spend my budget food allowance for groceries is $200 a month, period. So you're going to have to come up with an estimate for some of these items that will be slightly variable. Other ones are pretty fixed. Your car payment is going to be fixed, and that's not going to change on you for many years. All right, so that's my recommendation on estimates. You really got to get a history before you go ahead and make those estimates. All right, so let's move on. So we've tracked our expenses and income, and now we've made some projections in our budget. Here is where our targets are based on what we've estimated or tracked over maybe a couple of month period of time. And for many of us, I will say this too. You can do, obviously, the wonderful thing about technology is you can do retrospective analysis. So you could actually start today, look at your bank account statements online. If you are using your debit card versus cash to make those payments, there is some questions, and you can obviously go back in a couple of statements and analyze pretty easily what you spent at Kroger or grocery stores, etc. There is some debate. I know that within the textbook, the author refers to getting away from some digital money. I think that's really preference. The wonderful thing about using digital money, using your card, using Apple Pay, is the ability to very cleanly track your purchases. Where a cash budget can be a little bit more difficult, even if you are using an application on your phone. So I think what using cash versus digital enforces a little bit discipline, enforces a little bit of thought before you make a purchase. It makes a little stop, if you will, versus me taking my phone and literally waving it over the receiver, and I've I've made the purchase with very little thought. So I think it does interject that. So I think you can work around that and still use digital options. Versus cash, as long as you kind of have that consciousness, which you're going to have after going through this course. You're going to have that level of consciousness with your purchases. All right, let's go on to tracking. So to track your budget, you must be able to track obviously those income and expenses on a regular basis. Very easy to do with, as I said earlier, with income. It's pretty easy. That doesn't change for most of us. The tracking of expenses is the hard part. And as I alluded to, it is very easy to do nowadays with budgeting apps that you can get for your phone. So please look at that. That'll make this whole process a lot easier for you and actually make it doable. Where before it was very, very laborious on pencil and paper and that kind of process that we had maybe 20 years ago. So do yourself a favor, find a nice little free app or one that doesn't cost, a couple bucks, maybe just a couple dollars. It's got a lot of good reviews in there. Maybe try a couple of them and see which one you like best. Uh, Key features for those applications I do talk about in a separate video, so make sure you take a look at that. At least key features I would recommend in looking at a budget tracking application for your phone. And then lastly, you're going to want to analyze. And income trends tend to be more constant. For most of us, it's the expenses that really are the variable ones, things that can creep up on you. For whatever reasons, things may change. You want to look at those differences between your projections that you've made and what you've actually spent. And you want to do that at least monthly. Now, I would say with the apps that are available on your phone, you can actually analyze it every second of the day. Every purchase, it will tell you whether you're on track or not on track. So you can almost have a continuous feedback on your budget. And so that's really, I think, a great thing. But if you don't do anything and you only look at it at least every now and then, at least look at it monthly, because then if you don't know where you're at, you don't know where to go. And then you will want to make adjustments. You'll find some things will change. Maybe life circumstances change. All of a sudden, your groceries, you're spending a lot more at Kroger because you had a baby, and now you're buying uh, diapers, which are very expensive, by the way. So if you have a kid, you are so happy when they get out of diapers because you save a lot of money because disposable diapers are very expensive. So you'll want to make adjustments when necessary. So a couple of things also to think about when you're looking at the budgeting process. I say here that you want to look at these things monthly. You will want to segment, the goals. When you look at the goals that you are developing for your budget. Um, Let me go back up to the categories so we can talk. So let's say, for example, insurance. Now, one of the things with insurance, homeowners insurance, I'll pick on that one. Homeowners insurance is due once a year. You pay the premiums for most of us. You pay the premiums on your homeowners insurance one time a year. So how do you break that up? Well, you want to take that homeowners insurance. Let's say, for example, maybe it's $600 a year. You want to break it up into a monthly goal. Okay, so that would be $50 a month. I'm going to need to save because I know, and at XYZ time, and whatever month that is, I'm going to need to pay 600 bucks for that insurance, which means you're going to have to actually save that money. That money's going to have to be saved you're going to have to kind of accrue that money, knowing, which accruing basically just means kind of saving it. You're going to have to save that money, knowing that you're going to need to expense it at some point down the road. So know that some of these cash outflows that you're going to have are not going to happen monthly, but the best way to think about them is monthly. So you can, again, if you're getting an application for your phone, most of them will default to that monthly mode. So even though you may put in an annual expense, it will, again, a lot of these phone apps will say, insurance, and you'll type it in. You'll type in homeowners insurance, and then it will say, is this annual? Is this weekly? Is this monthly? It's whatever. So you'll say, annual, but it will usually default your budgetary goals on a monthly basis. So you kind of know, where you're at. It's going to kind of plug in that expense behind the scenes, showing you how much you really have to do on a daily basis. So that's kind of good about those applications. So long story short, you're going to want to break down all of your expenses in monthly terms, even if they're not incurred on a monthly term, just so when you're examining your budget, you're seeing that expressed when you're comparing the income versus outgo in that time period. Otherwise, it makes it very, very difficult, and also makes it a little less concrete when you don't have it down on those monthly terms. All right, so that is all there is for the budgeting process. Hopefully you find it pretty simple. Just remember, you got to develop, track, and analyze. That's all you need to do, and use technology on your side, and it'll make the budgeting process a whole heck of a lot easier. Thanks for watching.